Bitcoin.
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 Bitcoin! The reason why people don't understand Bitcoin is because they don't understand money. Let's talk about this. Before some years, this used to have value.
500 रुपए और 1000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट लीगल टेंडर नहीं रहेंगे.
Now, it's just a piece of paper. You may think that's very obvious, but it tells us something very fundamental about this. This piece of paper had value because the government said it had value and that we believed it had value. Now, this kind of money is called fiat money. Almost all of our money is fiat money. Now, you may think, what's the problem? Well, somebody has to create this money. What if I told you that the same money that you and I have to work hard for, somebody can just print it out of thin air? No, I'm not talking about counterfeiting. I'm talking about how legal money is created. Monetary policies and money has more power than any politician or law. Most of us don't even know how things work. It's because it's filled with jargon and mumbo jumbo that it's really hard to understand. Henry Ford once said,
"It is well enough that the people of our nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, because if they did, there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Appa, it is Henry Ford, ma.
So I'm going to try and break it down for you so that anybody can understand. Now, many of the things I say in this video may seem disturbing at first. I felt the same way when I discovered how the system works too. For every claim I make, I have a reference, so you could fact check me at any time. First, let's talk about how banking works.
Hello, Mr. Banker. I have some extra money. Could you please keep it for me? Thank you, sir. Is that all? Sir, I'm having a business. Please lend me some money. Yes, my friend. We have the finest interest rates in the market. Just pay it back before we get really angry. Thank you, sir. Now I can go start my business. Sir, I have come to return the money with the interest. Thank you, Alhamdulillah.
That's how banking works, right? Wrong. Most banks today follow something called fractional reserve lending. There is a value called the reserve ratio, which is declared by the Reserve Bank of India. For the ease of calculation, it's considered to be 10%. What this means is that when banks receive a deposit of 10,000 rupees, they now have the right to lend someone up to 1 lakh rupees. You may be asking, where do they get the money from? Well, that's where we don't understand what money actually is. To a bank, money means just inputting a number in their computers.
Ha ha ha.
That number gets reflected on the borrower's account. And since he's not going to withdraw all of it as cash, it's okay. And most of us are going to just transfer it to another bank anyway.
Can you transfer this money into my friend's account?
So banks can just bounce these numbers between each other.
Ha ha ha.
So banks create new money and lend it to you at an interest. And they gain immensely out of this because it's literally just free money. If you don't believe me, listen to this guy in a suit.
Basically, the banks sit there, they wait for deposits to arrive, and if they have enough deposits, they lend them out to somebody else. And that is completely wrong. This is the wrong model of banks, because what happens in reality is exactly the opposite. And I've done this, I'm a banker, I know that that's how it works, and you can read it on many central bank websites, that's how it works. Is that banks, when they decide the economy is good, we are optimistic, we are now making loans, they don't need to wait for any deposits, because when they make a loan, they create the deposit. Right there, banks create money out of thin air.
Now, if everyone were to withdraw their money from banks all at the same time, banks would go bankrupt. And if we were to stop borrowing money, there would be no money in circulation, because about 90% of our money is created in this way. And these are private banks. Now the government also creates money. You think when they spend something on public works or when the Prime Minister buys a private jet, they spend our tax money, right? Wrong again. They create new money.
This is for the war. This is for my private jet. This is for the road.
This is called deficit spending. Now you may be asking, what's the big deal? Why should I care? If you understand basic economics, you will know the law of supply and demand. It basically states that for the same demand, an item which is high in supply is less valuable than an item that is scarce. Now, when private banks and the government create new money, they are increasing its supply. What that means is that everybody now has more money and shopkeepers can price their goods at a higher price and everybody would be willing to pay. The price of the items just increased, or the value of currency in our hands just decreased because it buys less now. They call this inflation. So when the government prints new money to buy a private jet, the money in our wallet loses value proportional to the new money printed. That's the hidden tax that we all pay without us even knowing. If it's so easy for me to discover all this from just a Google search, how have governments been able to get away with this for so long? And why haven't we done anything about it? Well, this is hardly the first time in history that this is happening. 50 AD Rome.
Romans and countrymen, from tonight, the silver currency Denarius will be your currency.
Long live the king! Long live the king!
The Denarius was introduced as their new currency. It was made from pure silver, and the people started using it as money, as a medium of exchange. And then they were invaded by the barbarians. War! They didn't have enough money to pay the army.
Your Majesty, we don't have enough money to fight the war. No problemo! Make a more Denarius. But Your Majesty, we have no silver. No problemo. Add a lead to the Denarius. Then we have a more Denarius.
They doped the Denarius with lead in order to produce more of it. The people still used it as money because the government said that it was money. Kings realized that they could make people do whatever they want by just creating money. People did anything for money. Went to war, built monuments. The Denarius was doped so much that there was hardly any silver left. And now, since there were a lot more Denariuses in circulation, what used to cost about 1 denarius previously now costed about 500. The prices of everything kept increasing uncontrollably until the whole empire fell into itself on a civil war due to economic crisis. When somebody is given the power to create money, they abuse it. 1789, France. Right after the French Revolution, the newly formed government issued a currency called Assignat against land and property.
We have come up with a new revolutionary currency called the Assignat.
And then war happened.
Make more Assignat. Monsieur, but we do not have the property to back it. But nobody is knowing that.
They printed so much more that the value of Assignat reduced drastically. Again, there was inflation, civil war, until their whole empire fell. When somebody is given the power to create money, they always abuse it. 1918, Germany. The German mark was first issued against gold, but then World War I happened.
Prince more for the war.
They just printed more German marks than they had gold for. And they printed so much more to make their people work that the German mark almost lost its value. People were using it as wallpaper, as kindling even. There were record levels of unemployment, strikes and hunger. When somebody is given the power to create money, they always abuse it. In fact, all fiat currencies go to zero. There is this interesting website that lists all fiat currencies that have ever existed in history. All of them go to zero. The reason why this part of history keeps repeating itself over and over again is because there was no better way. We can't carry gold around because it's too scarce, and somebody had to create our money. And in 1900, the US dollar is issued by the United States of America. It is initially issued against gold.
1 ounce of gold will always cost $20.
And then they printed more.
1 ounce of gold will always cost $35.
In 1944, major countries came together for a pact. It was logical at that point of time, but let's see how that ended. It was called the Bretton Woods Agreement. What it said was the US dollar would be printed against gold at a fixed rate, and all other countries would print their currency against the US dollar. What could possibly go wrong? Of course, US went to war with Vietnam and they printed more money to fund the war. Many countries realized that the US had just printed more currency than they had gold for, and they wanted their money back. And Nixon made this speech.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
In plain English,
Damn you, you ain't getting your money back.
just like that, all currency in the world became fiat. It was backed by nothing. And that's the era we live in right now. And most of our money isn't even printed by governments. It's printed by private organizations. In fact, the Federal Reserve of the US is a privately owned entity.
I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
It's one of the biggest open secrets there is. The Reserve Bank of India used to be owned by a private group, and they didn't go down without a fight when they were nationalized. But that doesn't matter because every other currency in the world is printed against the US dollar, and the US dollar is printed by a private entity. Just look at this graph. It's the value of gold in US dollars. Whenever the price of gold goes up, we know that people have printed more money because they can't escape the law of supply and demand. Just look at this inflation. It's a scam happening right in front of our eyes. So you would work hard all your life and then keep your savings in your bank account. People would eat it away without you even knowing it. You would put it in the stock market. Things get even worse because the same people who have the power to create money also bid for stocks. This creates extreme overvaluation of stock markets and then it all comes crashing down all at once. That's what caused the Great Depression of 1930. So many people went hungry while a few rich came out even richer. In 2008, like clockwork, the housing crisis happened and the banks were bailed out by quantitative easing. That's literally just creating more money. Printing money is like taking a drug. When they stop doing it, the withdrawal symptoms set in and they have to print more. The world debt is more than our GDP combined. Like, how does that even happen? Because every other country decided to print more money and export it to other countries. That's what happens when somebody is in charge of creating money. I think nobody should be in charge of creating money. And that's where Bitcoin comes in. In many explanations about Bitcoin, you may hear the terms mining, proof of work, and a lot of other jargon. But you don't really need to know about HTML and HTTP to really understand how the internet works, right? So I'm not going to go into the technical aspect of how exactly Bitcoin works. There is a link in the video description if you want more on that. The way Bitcoin works is that people on the internet all have a record of how many Bitcoins everybody had to begin with. And then whenever somebody makes a transaction, everybody records the transaction. Nobody can introduce new Bitcoins without everyone on the network agreeing. This way, everyone can trust each other without a centralized body or an organization because everybody has the record of how much everybody else has. This is why it's called a distributed ledger. How is Bitcoin valuable if it's created from nothing? Well, the same reason why gold is valuable. Because it's a scarce commodity. There will only ever be so many Bitcoins in existence. Unlike fiat currency, which the government makes in order to manipulate people in whatever way they want, no one person or an organization can create Bitcoin. For the first time in history, we have a system where nobody can create money. It's created by software and it's run by everyone. What this means is that if we all use Bitcoin as money, governments can't go to war by making us all poorer. Your work will be valued and your money will not lose its value over time. Big banks and the top 1% who are in control of the current monetary system can't manipulate the people the way they have been. That's what it's all about. It's a power struggle between the old monetary system and the new one. This transition won't be easy though. The ones in power won't go down without a fight. Gandhiji once said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Cryptocurrencies have only been getting negative media attention, being presented as something for terrorists, as scams.
Currency of criminals worldwide.
I'm not denying that they don't exist, they do. But cryptocurrencies represent something much more, the start of a new age, where trust from the governments is transferred back to the people. An age where nations can't go to war because they just don't have enough money. An age where the rich don't become richer by feeding off the poor. Governments, central banks, and the wealthy.
I could care less about Bitcoin.
They may ignore this.
It's a massive scam and a massive bubble.
They may laugh at this.
Ban cryptocurrency trading.
They may fight this.
Nationwide crackdown.
But in the end, The reason why most of you might have clicked on this video must have been because of the recent surge in the price of Bitcoin. Now, the price of Bitcoin or any other stock is just the last price that a buyer and seller agreed upon. It doesn't reflect anything about its fundamentals. So when you see price actions going crazy, it just means that people were willing to sell and buy at those different prices. And it has a lot to do with emotion rather than actual fundamental knowledge. With that being said, Bitcoin itself has a lot of flaws. For one, it's really slow and it has a lot of transaction fees associated with it. With recent currencies like Nano and IOTA, which are almost free and instant, Bitcoin may even become obsolete. The value may drop to zero. Don't get me wrong, the cryptocurrency market will definitely rise in value, but most cryptocurrencies would probably go to zero. So if you're an investor, don't put in more than you can afford to lose. Now, I know I haven't gone into how the blockchain itself works. Now, the blockchain is the fundamental technology that Bitcoin was based upon. It's kind of like how email is to the internet. Blockchain is kind of like a data structure, and it's now being replaced by something called as directed acyclic graphs. But the distributed ledger technology is truly groundbreaking, and it has the potential to change our lives. This video wouldn't have been possible without Ahmed, Siddharth Pratapneni, my uncle, and me. Thank you so much for watching through this long video. I always believe that doing your own research is better than listening to someone just because they said so. And if you want to dig in deeper, I highly recommend the series by Gold and Silver, video in the link description, and also the video by Cold Fusion. If you really like this video, please do share it with your friends. And for more content like this, subscribe.